person who has a specific type of cancer the same kind of theme of experience that the person had. So he's like, this seems to be kind of the formula for how the body creates what we call cancer. What if this was something that my body was doing for my benefit, for my survival that I didn't realize? I haven't found any model that is as liberating and will set you free and allow you to have peace in the face of a seizure, peace in the face of a lump, peace in the face of blood in the toilet. It's a journey of truth and liberation, coming to terms with these lies that you've believed about yourself.
Alrighty. Hello, everyone. Welcome back to Enheartened. And I am really excited about this conversation because, for those who have been tuning into this show, you know that I am a sucker for truth. I am a sucker for freedom, like real freedom, not just performative, kind of like, look at me, performative freedom that we often see and observe out there on social. And I love inviting on the show people that I see embody that in their own way, in their work, in how they live. And this is what I see in Dr. Melissa Sell, um, on so many different levels, not just as, you know, a health practitioner, but beyond everything, in the way you carry yourself, in the way you share your message, in the way you embody what you're preaching. And I just have a thirst to to hear more of what shapes somebody like you who is right now, I want to say, championing a way of being with our bodies, a way of relating to the world that can really foster freedom inside. So I just threw a whole bunch at you. Dr. Melissa Sell, thank you for coming onto the show. How are you?
I am so good and so honored to be here and really excited for this conversation and for connecting with another lover of truth and freedom. And that is what has drawn me. I feel like the paradigm of the five biological laws, the truth of the Germanische Heilkunde, it drew me because I'm like, oh, there's truth here, there's freedom here, there's peace here that does not exist with the other ways I was viewing health and viewing the world and viewing my biology. And when I found it, it just has that ring. It has, and that's so many people before they even understand the breadth and the depth of all the germ layers, they hear it and they're like, yes, yes, this makes sense. And the truth does. The truth makes sense. And it's simple. And when you hear it, you're like, I want to hear more. So I'm excited to chat further about this different way of looking at the body and health through this lens.
I love it. And as we're going further, because, we are navigating times where we have to, I just want to say to everybody listening, um, all the information that we will be sharing today, this is basically the disclaimer. All right. So I kind of have to give it to you. You are responsible of what you choose to do with the information that you're going to be receiving here. And at the same time, I'm inviting you to listen with an open mind, an open heart as well, because you might be receiving something that's really meaningful to you. Now, as we go in deeper, all right, everybody, disclaimer said, done, okay? This is not a substitute for you working with your health professional, done. Now, let's dive into the real stuff. You offered a few zip files that I just want to unpack. You mentioned five biological laws. You gave the German version of the German expression or wording of German New Medicine. So how about we start there for the person listening to this and being like, what the hell are these people talking about? How can they begin to understand German New Medicine or kind of yeah, let's just start there.
Yeah, we'll start with the story of Dr. Hammer,
Yeah.
which is the how he discovered these five biological laws was through a personal tragedy. So,
Yeah.
and when I came across this information in 2017 and I heard his story, I was like, what on earth? How is not everyone talking about this? So his experience Dr. Hammer was a traditional medical doctor. He, early on in his career, he developed several patents. There's something called the Hammer scalpel. So he patented these medical equipment and a massage table. So he's got all these patents. He was making money off of his patents. And him and his wife, who was also a medical doctor, they treated people pro bono, and so they just, were medical doctors. And in 1978, their children, so one of their sons and one of their daughters, went on a trip. And so they're on this trip on this isle, the Isle of Cavallo, and they're on a boat, and a crazy thing happens. This
Mm.
incredibly bizarre story unfolds where the exiled crown prince of Italy gets really mad at the kids who are, on vacation or on this boat. He accuses them of stealing his dinghy, and he goes and confronts them. And Dirk Hammer, 17-year-old, handsome young man, is sleeping on this boat, and the prince shoots this gun, and the bullet goes through the side of the boat and hits Dirk Hammer. And from there, obviously chaos ensues. They have to get him, airlifted to the hospital. Initially, the prince, admitted that he did shoot the gun. Later, he said, no, I didn't shoot the gun. So it becomes this big political drama in addition to a fight for Dirk Hammer's life. And so,
Yeah.
Dr. Hammer gets the call, your son is in critical condition. And so they have to do all these things to try to keep him alive. He has his leg amputated. It's just not looking good. Dr. Hammer overhears that, the royal family really doesn't want to keep him alive because having a invalid man on the whole story is just an embarrassment. And so, it'd be easier if he didn't make it through this. And so he ended up not making it through this tragedy. And so he died in his father's arms. And a couple of months after the loss of his son, Dr. Hammer developed a testicular tumor.
Yeah.
And he had an intuitive knowing that there was a connection between the loss of his son and what was going on with his testicle. And later, I think at the time he just had traditional, surgical treatment for it. And then afterwards, though, he's like, I have to test this theory. I need to talk to cancer patients. And he worked in an oncology unit. He was the head of this oncology ward in Bavaria. And so he started to talk to the patients and ask them, did you have something shocking and traumatic happen to you prior to your diagnosis? And every single time, every single case, every person was like, yes, something
Yeah.
happened. But it wasn't just something like a stressful something, it was a specific flavor of an experience.
Yeah.
So every man that had testicular cancer experienced a loss of a child, of a loved one, an unexpected, shocking loss. Every woman who had a breast cancer that was of a glandular type, she had a severe worry for someone that she loved. Everyone with lung cancer in the alveoli experience a death fright shock. And so this pattern basically starts to emerge. He's recognizing, okay, similar stories, same exact type of, cancer that is being diagnosed because of the story that was linked. And then he looked at brain scans and he found that there's actually an objective measurable impact in the brain at a specific location. So for every person who has a specific type of cancer, there's always the cancer on the organ level, there is an impact in the brain, and there's the same kind of theme of experience that the
Yeah.
person had. So he's like, this seems to be kind of the formula for how the body creates what we call cancer. But then he continued to think about this, and it seems as though the body is actually not messing up, because that's the idea. The
Yeah.
conventional idea with cancer is the body is making a mistake. There's something wrong with the genes. They're no longer controlling themselves and the cells are replicating out of control. Or something poisonous got in your body. And so now the body is trying to protect you from that poison. So those are both ideologies where something bad is happening,
Yeah.
right? There's something wrong, a mistake, something poisonous, something that's not supposed to be there. But
Yeah.
Dr. Hammer's idea was that this seems to have a logic to it, a biologic. The body seems to be doing this intentionally and on purpose. And when you think about it, it makes sense. If you think, what did the testicles do? And what happened to him? He lost his offspring. His offspring died.
Yeah.
And so if there is an ancient program in our biology that helps us when we lose our offspring, wouldn't it make sense that it would enhance the thing that helps us to create new offspring, which is
Yeah.
the testicle? Or
Yeah.
if we have a death right conflict and we're afraid we're going to die, I'm afraid I'm not going to be able to breathe in anymore. I'm not going to be able to get oxygen in my body so I can, run all of my systems. And so wouldn't it make sense that the body would make more lung tissue so I could absorb more oxygen? And so that was, he thought at first that this just applied to cancer, but he went on to find out this applies to a pimple, to a hemorrhoid, to an earache, a sinus infection, that all of these things have a rhyme and a reason and a biological meaning. So that's like the big picture of the German new medicine, or the Germanische Heilkunde. That's the German phrase, which is, it's kind of a very beautiful term that's hard to translate in English, but
Yeah.
it's about family. It's about brotherhood, sisterhood, about sharing in this kinship and this beautiful holy like healing knowledge. So the
Yeah.
Germanic healing knowledge is roughly how that translates.
Oh, I love this kind of baseline foundation that you're offering. And there are so many things that I heard. I just want to echo and hear what you think of it. The first word, and that's the first time I kind of create this separation in the biologic. It's like I never really separated both the bio and then logic on the other side, which is there is actually a conscious mechanism. There's a logic behind what the body does. The body is not dumb, and it's far from being dumb. Um, and we haven't been able to understand the language of the body so far, and we're just beginning to understand the logic of the body, or of this, kind of cell. We call it clumps of cells. Anyways, that thank you for that. And the other thing that I'm hearing you say is that he's through his work he's been able to identify or kind of map a little bit what happens between, I mean, let's say there is some sort of stressor that happens, and maybe the person is either not even fully aware of the stressor, or not able to resolve it to a certain degree, and then a mechanism kicks in that is creating either an adaptation or a compensation for what is going on. Would you say first that this is, you know kind of accurate? And also, would you say that these biological mechanisms are defaults that are at work within us, and that they will remain the defaults until we learn how to engage them in a new way? I'm not sure if the question is clear.
Yeah, I love the way that you're processing it. And absolutely. So it is an adaptation. That is, I call it the language of adaptation. It is how, so instead of viewing anything as a disease, as a sickness, as something going wrong, I look at it as how did the body adapt to
Hmm.
that life circumstance? And so there are three criteria for something that turns on a biological program. So it's not just general stress. So a lot of people will hear, that's the problem. If you hear just a little bit about the
Yeah.
five biological laws and a little bit about GNM, it can be a disaster. But if you
Yes.
really learn the whole paradigm and you really understand it, then it brings the freedom. But if you hear just a little bit, some people can get freaked out about freaking out. They're like, "Oh, everything is going to cause cancer if but no, the biological adaptation program, so it's a significant biological, it's embedded, like you said, it's a default mechanism of life. So again, that biologic. Everything that the body does is to aid survival and reproduction
Yeah.
because that is biological. Bio is life. Logic is what makes sense. This is what makes sense for continuing life. If an organism loses its offspring in a shocking manner, and it was highly acute, dramatic. So it has to be like a big deal to the organism, to the individual. It has to catch you off guard. So something that you can anticipate, like, oh, I'm going to have to pay out this big chunk of money for a down payment on something. Like that might be stressful. It might be,
Yeah.
oh, I'm worked up about it, but it's not unexpected. You knew you were going to have to put that money down. You knew you were going to have to do that. So it doesn't catch you off guard. So the body doesn't need to turn on the adaptation program if it's something that you can anticipate. It's only when it's unexpected, acute and dramatic, and you feel isolated. You're like, I'm all alone. It's me and this problem. That's how
Yeah.
it feels when you have a conflict. You, in that moment, you don't have support. You don't have anyone to help you. It's just you and your biology. And so that's when the biology steps in and says, I can assist. And it
Yeah.
assists by adding extra tissue in some cases, eroding tissue in other cases, or stopping function. And so it's got these different mechanisms that it can utilize in order to support your survival through this thing. And so
Yeah.
that's how the adaptation turns on in response to a specific event.
I love the clarification. And I want to ask you, do you feel that the body has this kind of like innate intelligence, a meter that is evaluating your level of resourcefulness at any point in time when you're dealing with a specific situation in your life? Because it feels like it does to me, hearing you, it feels like there's some sort of like intelligence that is assessing, okay, is this person resourceful to be able to deal with this, to be able to resolve that, like supported enough? And I feel like, and that intelligence assesses, okay, when this person is really cornered, or when that's the impression that this person is operating from, that there's no other way out. Therefore, I have to kind of like either get cells to proliferate, create cancer or an ulcer or any other, yeah, inflammation that I don't know. Would you say it's somewhat accurate?
Yes, that's a great description, except the inflammation piece comes during the restoration process. So during the
Hmm.
active conflict, so that's part of the law of two phases, which is the second biological law, which is how what is going on in the body, how it manifests. And so inflammation is specifically once the conflict has been resolved, once you have found a relief, found a resolution. But I really love the way that you describe that it's your subjective view of the scenario. It's not the objective scenario in and of itself. So, like a divorce or an affair or a separation, not no two people are necessarily going to experience that in the same way. They
Yeah.
might, but it depends on their own unique view of the world. Like you said, their access to resources, their access to support, like your personal history, your family history, how your parents dealt with problems like that. It's patterned. And so so before you even have a conscious thought in your mind about what the conflict is, your biology, they've done tests on this. Like your brain has already made the decision 6 seconds before you're consciously aware that you made a decision. The brain
Yeah.
already knows. So that's how quickly this is happening. And that's why it's very, uh, important to distinguish between a psychological problem and a biological conflict. That's Dr. Hammer was really he wanted people to get out of psychologizing, because a lot of times people will say, "Well, I wasn't upset about it, so this couldn't have been a conflict." But if you
Yeah.
have a symptom, we know that your biology experienced the conflict, even if at a psychological level you diminished it. You're like, "Oh, it
You
wasn't that big of
downplayed
a deal."
it.
I've been very surprised sometimes when I've got a symptom and I'm like, I didn't think it was that big of a deal, but my biology did. And so that's why we want to learn to think biologically rather than just psychologizing all the time.
Yeah. Man, what you're saying there is really amazing. And I love the thought of biologically thinking. And what does that even look like to let the facts speak more than our speculations? Because I think we've become really, really good at creating narratives about what we think is happening, whereas the body is going to show you this is where you at, this is where your programs are, this is what you're truly operating from. And instead of thinking about where you think you are subjectively, just take note of what the body is saying and grow with that, heal with that. That's how I'm receiving what you're saying at the moment. So would you say that we can therefore look at the body as a factual mirror of how free we really are, or how, yeah, of how free we really are?
Yeah, I mean, the body doesn't lie. The body always tells the truth. It always tells the truth of your biological experience. And so when we can interpret the symptoms through that lens, it does show us where you're not free. It shows us where you're conflicted. It shows us where you're, especially things that are like a chronic problem. I'm
Yeah.
stuck in a chronic story. Something happened that caught me off guard and it shaped my identity. And that's why a lot of people have symptoms for a really long time and have a chronic condition or get diagnosed autoimmune. And this is, the body never works against itself. The
Yeah.
body never, because that would be illogical. That is
Yes.
anti life. The body is doing what is logical. However, in our, mind, we can stay in conflict for a very long time, or
Yeah.
we can live we're living unbiologically. I mean, most people, the way that we live is not in harmony with nature, not in harmony with the seasons, not in harmony with how we were, our ancestors lived. And so it just in that we see that people are, going around people that trigger them, right? People that they don't resonate with, and they force themselves to, well, they think that they have to stay in a certain job, right? They're not free. They're like, oh, well, I have to stay in this job and go to this boss that demeans me. And so I'm constantly on this chronic track because I have not, started my business because I lack the confidence because I have a self-devaluation conflict. And so, yes,
Yeah.
that's where, your chronic joint pain is a chronic self-devaluation conflict, right? And
Yes.
so that could let me know, ooh, I keep devaluing myself. I keep going back into this unnatural environment. I'm not trusting in my gifts. I'm not trusting in my message, and I'm not feeling confident to go out on my own, right? And so why would a person feel that way? Well, maybe their grandfather failed in business, and so their whole family now doesn't trust their instincts, doesn't trust themselves to be an entrepreneur. It's like this is just a potential scenario of how a person can get trapped in, conflicts and adaptations and a lifestyle that isn't in alignment with their, again, their highest gifts, their truth, and, what is actually possible for them. And so this does every time I have a call with someone, we're working through the symptom. And the symptom is just this, it's the thread
A
that we pull
thread.
to get to the core of the issue. Where are you not in alignment? Where are you not living your gifts, your truth, your message? And where are you believing lies? Where is your energy split? And so it's a journey of truth and liberation, and, coming to terms with these lies that you've believed about yourself.
Yeah. Yeah. I love that so much. I want to go back to the five biological laws, but before doing that, I want to take a little detour. It's like what gets I read your story, I read your bio, and I'm always fascinating by what gets somebody on a path like this. It's like what caused you to even what predisposed you. I'm not sure if that's how you say that. For this path, because I saw you, you know, went through chiropractic school. I also have another question about that because I have many friends that are, I would say, most of the rebel health practitioners that I have in my life at the moment had a journey through chiropractic school. I don't know what you guys go through in chiropractic school there, but I feel like there's something that predisposes you for trusting the body more than what I've seen from other medical practitioners, let's say a psychiatrist or, you know, even an MD. So I'm curious about your own personal journey. What predisposed you for this? What's your take on it?
So with the chiropractic history, so when I got out of high school, I got a job at a chiropractic office, and the people there were vibrant and healthy, and they exercised, and they just were like no other people I'd ever been around before. And I started going to chiropractic seminars, and I was like, these people are so healthy and vibrant, and they are so alive. And I was very drawn to that. And, the history of chiropractic, it's deeply philosophical. So the
Yeah.
originators of the chiropractic philosophy, D.D. and B.J. Palmer, they have these volumes of these green books, and they're just like they would wake up in the night and just write and write and write and write and write, and it was all just this total
Almost
channel,
like
this
channeled,
total
yeah.
yeah, they just channeled all of this brilliant wisdom about, and I would read these books, and I just remember, there have been a few moments in my life of just like that enlightenment where you're just like, whoa. And I had it while reading the green books. And, BJ Palmer just talking about the innate intelligence in the body, built the body from scratch. So there's universal intelligence, which is all of the intelligence of the universe. And then innate intelligence is that all of that intelligence in the operation of your body. It's the master chemist, it's the master biomechanical engineer. It built all of this amazing, this living clay that works so beautifully together. I actually just recently, just a couple weeks ago, had an amazing experience doing an integral anatomy dissection lab. And so it was
Mm,
10 days in the lab, exploring the human body, which we did in chiropractic school, but I didn't have the framework of the biological laws. And so I was really drawn to taking this class. And I'm just in awe. I mean, when you just look at the engineering of this system and the vortex of the heart and the everything about it is just so incredible. And that's
yeah,
what the chiropractic philosophy fills you up with when you are coming from not just a mechanical perspective. Some chiropractors are very, just mechanical about it. But
yeah,
when you're coming from that life force energy, the wisdom that built your body is maintaining your body. And the only thing that disrupts it is what they called subluxation or thoughts, traumas, and toxins. And so that was my model until I found the biological laws and saw that this is fully in alignment with everything, all of the chiropractic philosophy, even more so, because it really just gets you back to that piece of the body's never making a mistake. The body is
yeah,
always doing what makes sense for life. And everything we're calling a disease, in the old model, in the old chiropractic model, I thought that misalignments cause, disruption to information to the organs. But now I even see that what we're calling misalignments in the spine, we have to look at what are the conflicts that the person has experienced. Intellectual self devaluation
yeah,
affects the neck. Injustice, self devaluation. And so, we want to work with, yes, the physical body. Yes, there are physical things that we can do to optimize, mobility and optimize our performance because, again, we're sitting all day long and we're looking at computers and we're looking at screens and we're not living in a natural way. So a lot of biomechanical patterns do get disrupted. So the physical work is important. But for me, I got more interested in what's going on in here. And that's what,
yeah,
for my own personal journey, that was the thing is from the outside. If you watched me go throughout my day, I'm eating all the healthy foods, I'm doing all the exercises, and I'm taking care of my body, and I'm fit, and I'm all of these things. But inside, there were conflicts. There were all
yeah,
sorts of patterns and unseen from the outside. And so that's where my journey and my work took me to. I got to get in here.
yeah,
All of the outside stuff. Yes, it's still good to eat healthy. Yes, it's still good to exercise and get sunlight and, get enough sleep and sleep in harmony with the day night rhythm. But if we don't resolve your conflicts, and if you're not aware of what your conflicts even are because you're so distracted and rushed and you're so fixated on the physical stuff, people get
hmm,
so fixated. I was fixated on the food for the longest time. That was my big thing. I was like, this food is the source of all illness. And if you get your food right, and then I realized, oh, it's not just the food. I knew people
yeah,
that were eating perfectly and living these perfectly healthy lifestyles, but that does not prevent conflict, right?
yeah,
It can downgrade, and if you're living harmoniously in many regards, it can help you to be less susceptible, maybe in some cases, to conflict. But if a shocking thing happens, you could have the purest diet and your body will still turn on this adaptation. And so
yeah,
that's where, marrying all of these ideas, but really coming back to the core of the body is wise. It only does what makes sense. And I think the chiropractors really do have that deep knowing.
yeah. I love that. And it helps me kind of connect the two sides because I was like, there must be something in chiropractic school that it just gets these people wired for, okay, there's a deeper truth beneath everything that we're seeing. And something that you're saying about there are some people who are mechanical chiropractors and working at the level of like aligning the bones and the joints and all of that and the spine, which is fantastic. And there are people that are really attuned to the fact that there's an energy flow going here. And that energy actually maybe wants to communicate with me as a practitioner, as a chiropractor. Would you say you consider yourself as a form of like in your own way, you're channeling the innate intelligence of the body of the person you're working with and attempting to really speak the language of the person's innate intelligence to understand where there's resolution needed.
Yeah, I just hold up the mirror. I say, this is what your symptoms are telling us, me and you, that you want to bite someone. If your teeth are falling out, if you've got tooth decay, it's like, okay, there is a desire to bite back, to defend, to speak your mind. And then there is also a contraction. There's a, I can't do that. I'm not allowed. I'm not. And so there's a split energy there. And so so I'm bringing that to your attention. And now you need to observe how that's happening in your life. Why don't you feel that you are capable of biting back? When did this start? Often in childhood, right? That you were smacked for talking back. Therefore, you wanted to say something and then you held back. And then that became a pattern in your life. Right. And so it's like drawing your awareness to that. That's what the work is. Every single symptom is telling a story, whether it's the thyroid or the lungs or the muscles. Every single body part is letting us know. It gives us such an insider's look at what's going on with you, at what you experience and how you perceived it. And when you can recognize that and you see it happening, oh, I'm doing it right now. I'm devaluing myself. I'm saying, oh, I can't say that because I'll get in trouble. Or, and it's like, if you don't slow down and question these automatic patterns, you keep on the track. And so that's the coolest thing is this, everything about this work, it is empirically observable. Like you can see it on yourself. And
Hmm.
that's why no one should believe this. And the people that haven't observed enough because truly these are laws of nature. This is just how biology works. And if somebody says, "Oh, well that didn't happen," is it that it didn't happen or that you didn't see it? You haven't seen it yet because once you see it, you're like, "Oh my gosh, I can't believe I used to think that this was the food."
Yeah.
People think that I used to think it was the food that caused this problem. But now I see that there was a conflict going on in my life when I ate that food and the food got flagged and now my body reacts every time I eat that food. And when they saw the connection and they realized, oh, that super upsetting event got linked biologically and it
Yeah.
makes sense. It made sense for the body to have an early warning signal. If something traumatic happened, something upsetting and conflicting happened when you were eating bread, and now every time you eat bread, the body's like, okay, we have to turn this program on. That makes sense. But when
Yeah.
you realize that it's no longer necessary, the program can resolve.
Oh, I love that so much. So what you're saying, there are all these many unconscious associations that happen within, and especially when what the way I'm hearing you is, let's say something that qualifies as a conflict. It's dramatic. It's like um I don't know. It's there's shock in there. There's the element of surprise. It's almost as if that innate intelligence will take a snapshot of everything that was going on in your life during that time, what you were eating, maybe even what you were wearing. I don't know. Um, Anything relevant or that seems to be relevant in the moment, and the reaction can, I mean, maybe even an allergy can originate from a moment like that. Would you say that it is somewhat accurate?
That's exactly how it works. Body takes a snapshot and then that food and so that's why it depends. Someone's like, "Oh, well, I'm allergic to this." And say, "Well, what symptom do you have?" The symptom that you have when you eat the food tells us the story of how you felt. There's a young man and he had terrible eczema. Terrible just everywhere, just itchy, red, inflamed eczema his whole life since he was a baby. And he found this work and he's like, "Okay, there has to be a reason." And dairy was one of his tracks. When he had dairy, it would just flare up like crazy. And
Yeah.
so the skin is about separation. It's about closeness. I want touch. I want closeness. And so when you're a baby, the conflict is with your mother because the
Yeah.
baby, what does the baby need more than anything in the world? Mama
Yeah.
needs touch, needs skin contact to know because a baby in nature that is separated is a goner, right? And
Yes.
the baby's biology knows that. If I'm separated from my mother, I'm not okay. Like I'm a goner. And so when the baby is separated, the skin goes through an adaptation process of numbing. There's loss of tissue cells. There's micro ulcerations in the skin that numbs the skin, and there's also short-term memory loss
Yeah.
because it's easier on the organism to forget what is lost than to remember it. And
Yeah.
so he's running this track, having dairy, and he calls his mom. And he's like, "Mom, when I was a baby, how when did you go back to work?" Because his mother ran a company and he knew that she was a working mom and how soon. And she said something like 3 weeks, like something very, very short period of
Yeah.
time. And he had this insight. Oh, no wonder I probably got formula because if a mother's back at work, she, unless she's pumping full time, she's very likely having some type of supplemental formula or solely given formula, and often dairy based, right? And so the biology flags dairy and separation, and that got linked in the subconscious psyche. And so every time there's dairy, there's a big rash. And so through bringing his awareness to it, and a conflict is resolved when that deep part of you realizes this can't happen again. This is no longer relevant for me. There's no
Yeah.
reason to keep this biological program active. It's no longer, it's served its purpose. It's, we can turn it off when it's no longer relevant, when you can laugh about it. And
Yeah.
so that was how this young man worked through this conflict for himself. And so how you described it is perfect. Body takes a snapshot, that food. Now, it could have been an indigestible morsel conflict. And then the
Hmm.
dairy causes, I need to run to the bathroom every time I have it. Right. So it depends on how it was perceived and how the body, flags the food, and or the, like you said, the color, the shirt, the sound, the music, the perfume, anything can get programmed in.
Yeah. Oh, that's so, that's so beautiful. And at the same time, I am hearing somebody who has a tendency towards neuroticism listening to this conversation and being like, holy shit. Now I need to pay attention to so many other different variables in my life. And maybe we'll address this a little later. There's just one thing that comes up, and I think it's foundational. There is a trust in the body as the foundation of all this work. And I have a feeling that the fear industrial complex, that's how I relate to to all the healing professions that need people to stay afraid of the body. It is basically a lot of medicine out there is predicated on the fact that the body cannot be trusted. It can break at any point in time. Cancer can arrive at any point in time, and there's very little we can do about it. So what you are asking to people is to listen to this and be like, maybe your body can be trusted, but don't believe it. Actually, experiment with it. Like, get in touch with the body. Start to see, like, become aware of the relationship the body has already been having with you and the patterns that have been, I don't know, playing out. It's a tall order. It's a big, tall order for somebody that has been for decades looking at the body as this machine that is so fragile it can break any time and you need to over medicate it. How can somebody, basically the question is, how can somebody begin to experimentally undo that old paradigm that this cannot be trusted, the body
Mm,
cannot be trusted?
yeah. And the next time you're chopping vegetables and you slice your finger a little bit, just watch what happens.
Yeah.
Just watch what happens. The body knows exactly what to do in every moment to keep this system running, right? Just sit there and ponder about how your body is operating, and how there is oxygen coming in and it's going into the blood and it's getting everywhere. Like, really think about the magnitude. That's what I had to do when I was reading these green books, and I'm just kind of like, my mind is being boggled by how many things are going right in my body for me to be even having an experience,
Yeah.
right? To be able to see things and smell things and taste things, and for functions to be going on in my body that I have no idea. I don't know how my body is regulating the perfect pH that I need at this moment, right? I don't know how my body is doing all of these things, but it's doing it in perfection. And so when something seems to be going wrong, if I start thinking about adaptation, right? How is my body adapting, right? If you start working with your hands and lifting heavy things, you get a calluses, right? It's like this, the
Yeah.
skin thickens, the body adapts. If you are at elevation, if you're up where the air is thinner, there's more red blood cells, right? The body is always adapting in this very brilliant and intelligent way. And the problem is we are so averse to any kind of discomfort or pain, and we
Yeah.
we experience pain and we say, oh, this is wrong, oh, this shouldn't be happening, right? And so when we perceive pain and we say, oh, this is wrong, this shouldn't be happening, we need to change our understanding of what's happening. Swelling means healing, swelling means tissue restoration, and the body is going through a repair. And so that is changing our language and just getting curious. Yes, a person who has, only seen their body as broken down. I spoke with a man not too long ago, and I was, explaining to him, this paradigm and helping him to see. And he's like, well, what if my body's just broken? What if there's just something wrong with me?
Yeah.
And so that just denotes that he has his whole life been told, you've got genetic conditions, you've got problems, your body's going to break down, there's something wrong with you, and he just believed it and didn't sit and ponder about all the things that are going right. We just focus on the things that are going wrong. So I would suggest to that person, just sit there and think about all the things that are going right inside of the body in order for you to be having this experience. And then just think about this area. What if this was an adaptation? What if this was something that my body was doing for my benefit, for my survival, that I didn't realize? And often when people sit with it, they make the connection.
Yeah. What I'm also hearing there is, basically you are coming as the 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 healing fairy who's telling people, okay, you will have to stop blaming something that is beyond your control. Because it is so, I've experienced it within myself, and I've seen that as well with people that I work with, is realizing, holy shit, are you trying to tell me that I actually have agency? You're making my life harder, because life would have been a lot more simpler if I actually did not have any agency, and this was just a set, this limitation that I'm perceiving, this cancer that is happening, was just some sort of like set circumstance. And I'm not saying that there aren't some cancers that are not just the outcome of, like, I don't know, a supercharge of toxins and stuff like that. Actually, I don't know, that may be not necessarily, I mean, even to that degree, it's like that would also be a program unfolding, which is the body attempting to work out the toxic load that is in the body. Anyways, where I'm getting with this is, this perspective is bringing so much power in the hands of people. And would you say that can also feel terrifying to some, to be like, no, 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 no. I don't want to take the responsibilities that come with this kind of power, because I would have to be responsible for how I feel and think about stuff. How do you usually help people navigate this conflict of responsibility? It's just like, no, you're bringing too much power that I know how to handle, that I even want to trust myself with.
Absolutely. And that's the thing, is anything that you say, this is what caused it. It's the food. You give the food the power. It's the toxin. You give the toxin the power. It's the genes. It's the government. When you point to things outside of you and say, it's that, again, it's off my plate. It's their fault. And so I get to be a victim. I get to be,
Yeah.
well, there's nothing I can do about it. I just have to cope with the reality. And people do enjoy victimhood, right? Because you get pity, you get a certain type of attention when you're a victim, when there's nothing you could have done about it, and when you kind of flip it. And that's the thing, is when you realize that it's empowering, it feels good, so to look at what about my person. And it's not about blame. It's not saying, and because that's another little slippery thing that people can do. You're saying, oh, I'm to blame for my disease. It's my
Yes.
fault that I have this. It's like,
I was gonna
no,
get there.
that is
Yeah.
something that people, will seize on, because they fear, and the responsibility is freedom, because if
Yes.
I can't respond, I can't be free. If someone else has to respond on my behalf, if I have to be rescued, if someone has to save me from it, again, I'm the victim. I'm in that drama triangle. We've got the perpetrator, the germ, we've got the victim, we've got the rescuer, which is the remedy, the supplement, the detox, the doctor, but this is me sitting and realizing my perception is creating my reality. And my experience of what's happening in my life is informing my tissues about what needs to happen. And if
Yeah.
I'm perceiving what my partner just said through the lens of, oh, that means they don't love me anymore. And I am going with that story rather than questioning that story. Is that actually true? Is this just a self-devaluation program that I, developed because of that time I got rejected when I was 10 years old from my friend group, or that boy was holding hands with someone else, and so now I built a story in my mind of I'm always rejected, I'm always left because of this thing that happened to me in the past. And so here I am with my partner now, and they just said something that didn't have to mean what I made it mean. It could
Yeah.
have meant any other thing. I could have labeled and assigned that meaning, but I made it mean, oh, he's rejecting me. He doesn't like me. And so I run the self devaluation program and I see, oh, my shoulder. Why does my shoulder hurt so bad? Well, because of the way that I unconsciously, and it's not like you're doing it on purpose. You're not doing this on purpose. You're
Yeah.
unconscious of it. That's the whole point.
Yeah.
And that's why the beauty of this work is drawing your attention to where your attention is. Drawing, what are you focused on? What's the automatic story, automatic label that you put on things that happen? And that's the cool thing I find about, and why I find the most freedom in this model over every other model that I have come across. Every other thing
Yeah.
that I've tried, the food and the diet and the changing my lifestyle, right? Like that was very empowering for a while. But then I found, I'm like, oh, well, there's only so much I can do. There's toxins everywhere, right? It's like, well, that's true. Yes. You could be born on a tiny island in the middle of nowhere and you still have 200 different chemicals in your umbilical cord blood. Like that's a known, we have put all sorts of stuff out into this world. That is not, natural to how things were before the Industrial Revolution, right? So
Yeah.
that is a fact of reality. And I believe that the body is highly adaptable even to those toxins. And so I believe in adaptability more than anything, right? Because that is what the body does. It is programmed for life, biologic, survive and reproduce. So
Yeah.
even if something comes in that is unnatural and foreign, I mean, isn't I love too, there was points where I got really freaked out and overwhelmed about the amount of like plastic garbage that's in the world, right? And
Yeah.
then I read something that said, oh, there are mushrooms that can decompose plastic. And I was like, yes, nature. Nature finds a way. Nature will always adapt to whatever messes we make. Right.
Yeah.
And so when I trust in adaptability more than anything, and I don't fear the toxin, I look for the conflict. I look at the conflict in my soul, even for why was I in that toxic environment? Why was I exposed? What was going on that caused that? That's a mirror too. And so
Yeah.
that's where I find it all is the most empowering to draw me back to what's going on in here that put me in that situation, that exposed me to that thing. Instead of looking at the thing, I look here. I look at me. I look in the mirror.
Well, yeah, that's so potent. And, you know, one thing that you say here that I think is really important to keep in mind is the evidence that the body is really showing up to support you in thriving in all ways, in all the ways possible. It's abundant. We're just not good at observing and noticing, and maybe we take the body for granted as well. I think for the most part we kind of do. um One thing that I want to explore a little bit deeper is it has to do with how do I put it. I would I'm interested in exploring the mechanisms of resolution. And what I'm wondering is, there's this question: is awareness enough? And also, do you have I have some cases in my own journey, maybe even observing for my children. When I started to be interested in German new medicine, I started combing my life, and I was like, okay, in 2018, or between 2016 and 2018, I had asthma problems, asthma issues out of the blue. And what had happened is, I mean, there's a story behind it. Basically, I decided to quit my PhD, decided to give a try to this kind of, I don't know, starting my business, fail at the business, so many different things. But I was fit. I was a health coach, fitness coach. And I was like, I don't understand why I have a hard time breathing and all of that. Um, but during that time, there are I can't tell you exactly what ignited the asthma especially, but there were so many things going on. I felt estranged from my family. I had traveled to come to Canada and had a beautiful scholarship opportunity, and I decided to drop it. My grades were excellent, and I was like, nope, this is not what I want to do. My soul is speaking to me, blah blah blah. I want to explore this. Family was disheartened, and so many different things, so many different conflicts. I was dealing with shame, that I was feeling like a failure, like ultimate failure, stupid. And like on one end, my soul, I felt this deep calling. On the other end, I was still dealing with the conflicts, I don't know, the conditioning of, bro, you're just a little stupid right here. What are you doing? Um, and somehow, after not necessarily having the full lens of German new medicine back then, around 2018, I said, I'm going to clean up my act. Like, if I hurt anybody, if I had impacted I don't know, pushed anybody away, I'm just going to have the conversations, make the apologies, and also express the ways where I had felt hurt and isolated and all of these different things. I cannot necessarily pinpoint what was the thing, but by the end of 2018, the shortness of breath, the wheezing, the asthma, and everything was gone, like fully gone. I haven't needed a puffer ever since, these inhalers ever since. And I started noticing, okay, there is something going on here that I don't understand yet. Something has happened. And I could even feel the next day some heaviness had lifted. I could not pinpoint it. So where am I going with this is, let's say somebody is beginning to dabble in this world and realizing, okay, there is more beneath my condition. And, in my own amateur way, I want to begin to explore what are the conflicts that are there, how I can begin to resolve some of them. What would you say to that kind of person?
I would say, I mean, similar to what you did is like, okay, where is there split energy in my life? You can use the specific symptom to pull the thread for what's the theme. So if it's asthma, something is threatening my territory. I have a territorial fear conflict or a scare fright conflict. Okay, when did this start? What kind of fears? What is my territory? Oh, my work, my home, my area of intellectual expertise, right? If I'm feeling threatened, if I'm feeling scared, if I'm feeling uncertain, right? It's like, okay, what's the story there? And we have, when it comes to resolution, we have practical and we have perceptual. We have the practical, that's going to be the most immediate biological way to resolve. Dr. Hammer's like, look for the practical resolution whenever possible, because that's going to be the one. Oh, I didn't have money and now I do. Oh, I didn't have a partner and now I do. I very practically, all of my being knows this situation has changed. Oh, what's going to help you? One of the phrases is when the stone falls from your soul, when you can laugh about it, when you're like, oh, no longer am I concerned about that,
Mm,
right? There's a very clear resolution. Now, there are certain things where the resolution needs to be a change in the way that you're seeing yourself or the world, the way that you're perceiving it. And often it can be a blend of both practical changes and changing the way you're thinking about it. And often changing the way you're thinking about it allows the practical changes to come about. So I really see them as one and the same. So we're, first looking for, okay, who do you need to talk to? Who do you need to clarify something with? If you've been holding back, this bite conflict, who do you need to, set some boundaries with or speak your mind so that you're feeling safe again? Again, look at all of this through the lens of survival and
mhm,
reproduction, right? For the man, it's very important his territory. For the woman, it's very important her sexuality. What's going on with her reproduction? And all of this involves our hormone levels. So there's so much depth to this. But I really, the way that you approached, you're like, something's got to change in my life, and how you just intuitively started having conversations. Something really cool so part again of the Germanische Heilkunde, the Germanic piece of this isn't about like Germany, the country. It's about the ancient Germanic peoples. They
mhm,
lived in a particular way, and they had this thing called the thing that would happen on like a Tuesday, and all the clans would come together and talk, right? And if there were issues, if there were disputes, like people would talk about things. If someone's barn burnt down, right? That could be a conflict. Oh, where am I going to, store my food for my livestock? It's like, the clan comes together and helps them to resolve that problem, right? So it was very like communal assistance of helping people to solve problems. So some things are very practical, some things require conversation, and that's where we don't have that.
Yeah.
As a culture, we don't have, the clan coming together, the community saying, okay, what's going on? Who needs something? Where is there a dispute? Where is there a miscommunication? Whose husband passed away and needs support, right? And so when the tribe comes together to support, can't we see how that lowers conflict? And we see these, what do they call those, blue zones, or these places where people live like over 100. How does that community operate? That's what we need
Yeah.
to be. How are people supported, right? How are conflicts once they happen? Because conflicts are a part of life. That's the thing, is we can't predict everything that's going to happen. And if we could, life would be boring. It wouldn't be worth living. Part of the spice of life is the unexpected challenge and how we adapt to overcome it. And the unexpected challenge, and that's how growth, evolution occurs. Is like, here's a challenge. What are we going to do about it? How are we going to activate our creative intelligence, connect to the infinite resources of the universe and find a solution to this? That's how growth happens. What that is, the ideal way. But modern life, we medicate, we disconnect, we medicate, and so nobody grows. And so that's why we were kind of at a standstill, a halt of our growth and evolution. We say, "Oh, don't learn about yourself. Take this injection, take this pill, take this thing, numb out, watch TV." It's like we're not growing, we're not coming together as a community. And so, when it comes to building a world where conflicts are lower, where we have things and we resolve them quickly and we have support, that is a complete restructuring of how life as we know it right now, right? It's a return to something that is biological instead of illogical.
Yeah.
Obviously, people are sicker than ever before, more disconnected than ever before, don't have support. And so when it comes to resolution, a lot of people, you have to look at, how am I living in a way that doesn't make sense? Does it make sense to drop my baby off at daycare and go work in an office? Does that
Yeah.
make sense? Or is that illogical? Is that making your baby sick and making you sick?
Yeah.
Right. And so often we do need to confront where our lifestyle is not harmonious with life, is not harmonious with growing healthy, well-balanced children. Right. And so it's confronting. And some people are ready for it. And a lot of people, I mean, we see the kind of return to traditional living in homes. I've got two cows, like we're returning to this this different lifestyle that makes more sense. But for some people, the journey getting back there is very difficult because they've
Yeah.
built their, they've got a mortgage, they've got all of these things that are built around, this very unnatural, unbiological life. And, often it would mean possibly simplifying. So there's a lot of paths to resolution,
Yeah.
and get creative. That's the thing, is there's not one necessarily one way to resolve this conflict. There's lots of ways. You just have to open up and get creative and get connected, right? You know the answer. That's one of the things too, is again that empowerment. You know exactly. You know how to resolve this. You have access to infinite intelligence just like everybody else, and you have the answers within you. But are you connected enough? Can you connect with that intelligence?
Yeah. In some of the things that you've said, part of me wonders, what is your appreciation or your assessment of the fact that most people have not eventually developed the level of emotional maturity that it takes to finance a new perception. I'm going to take an example. In order to put my life together, 2018, right, I don't know, 2017, shutting down the business, I had already quit the PhD in 2014 or something like that, feeling like a failure as shit. And in order to clear up things, I needed to just to have conversations with my family, for example. The level of either grief, anger, sadness, I was feeling rage about some things. In order to have that kind of conversation and eventually attempt some resolution, I had to be able to be with these feelings as I was even in the same, on the phone with them, having conversations. Sometimes I had to humble myself enough to be able to be like, I was wrong. Like, so would you say that people need at the same time to kind of develop the level of maybe emotional capacity, emotional maturity to embrace a new perspective that would be supportive to the body, to restore healing, to restore integrity.
Yes. I mean, that is a big part of it, as so many people are. And this Dr. Hammer even talks about the emotional stunting that takes place when you have conflicts early in your life, that your emotional intelligence, you freeze. You don't develop emotionally beyond that point. You're always very reactive. You can develop intellectually, but that emotional maturity stays at that low level, which is, kind of one of the systematic ways people stay suppressed. And, how can you access your sovereignty when you are stuck at the emotional maturity of a 5-year-old, right? Because
Yeah,
of the fact that your parents got divorced and you were, put in daycare and in school and all of these things. And so, yes, it's difficult. But when the person, sees that kernel of truth and they start to follow and they start to pay attention. I mean, myself, I had the hardest time paying attention to what was going on within me. I was very reactive. I was very emotional. I felt like, oh, I just feel this way. And there's nothing, I felt that there was no control that I had over my immediate automatic emotional reactions to my partner, to life events, to stuff with money. I mean, I was heavily programmed by my trauma and my conflicts from my early life. But it really actually, it took my partner sitting me down and saying, I think you're great, but I'm not interested in a lifestyle where we fight every Friday night, where we have arguments ritualistically. Because he started seeing it didn't matter what the content of the problem was. The theme was that there was always going to be a problem. And
yeah,
that was like, it opened my eyes in a way where I was like, okay, so I could keep doing this. I could leave this relationship and go find another one where I won't have to do this work, right? Where that person will maybe cope better with my unconscious habits.
yeah,
But I chose to stay and to watch, and it's been the most transformative, I mean, journey of my life, is to actually look at what I'm feeling, why I'm feeling that way, what's the story behind it. That's kind of we Steve and I teach this class called Awareness School, which is basically that. Like, I
yeah,
had to become aware. I had no awareness. And so, yeah, if you have no awareness, I mean, it's very difficult to impossible to make those kind of changes, to confront those feelings, see what they're about, have the conversations, and grow through it. Yeah, most people are in the dark to those patterns, which is, it's, but you have to want it. If you want it, you can get it.
yeah,
If there's that will, if there's a spark of you that knows life can be better, knows that you could have a peaceful life full of the things that light you up. If there's even just 1% of you that's like, I recognize there's something there for me, and if you just keep going with that, the path will unfold before you. And it's,
yeah,
it might be a long journey. Don't put a timeline on it, right? It might take literally, like, it took me years, years and years and years, and there's still layers, but like, it took years to really see what was behind it. But it's been the most worthwhile thing, because otherwise I'd be sleepwalking, right? I see the version of myself that didn't do this work, and, bless her heart, because she would be reliving patterns. She would have had children that were already reliving those patterns. I mean, it would just be the same thing set in motion. And so, I took a detour, and it's been tough, but it's been so worth it.
yeah. When I see you speak, I see that resolve in your eyes, in your voice, the passion. And part of me is like, has it always been the case? Even you mentioned something that that happened um with your partner Steve, and what was what I saw there was again this kind of devotion for I mean, when what I use to me, reality and truth is the same thing, like ultimate reality, ultimate truth, ultimate freedom. When somebody says, hey, something is not working in this dynamics, I mean, this can be either the most triggering thing ever, where you're like, fuck you, who the fuck you think you are, and I don't want to look into this, or just like you did. And I'm not saying that it was easy. I've been in a relationship myself for over 11 years, so I know that sometimes somebody brings the mirror and you're just like, take it down, like, get away from me. So would you say this level of devotion or resolve, is this something that came with the package of Melissa when she was a young girl, or is it something that you've learned to develop and there was a clear defining moment where you said, I'm no longer willing to engage the false version of me, or the version of me that thrived in like unconsciousness.
Yeah, I mean, truly I think it was Steve's influence in my life because he got me to think. Very much of my life was very much like not like actually thinking. It was following programs and patterns that were laid out for me from society, from, the religion of my parents and from school. It's like, okay, do it this way. And this like actually, he invited me to just look at what's going on, to pay attention, right? And to see what is the connection from here to here to here. How do you get from this thing happening to that rage emotion, or from that, from here to here? And it just was an invitation to slow down and look. And yeah, could that have been, I have always been a little, interested in weird stuff, or kind of, so I do think that there's certainly like an innate inclination for, a desire for freedom. And yeah, there were just certain things that happened at certain times that woke me up from how I was living a patterned, repetitive, this from unconsciousness. It was just default patterning, and I had to see, there's the default, there's that feeling, there's the payoff, there's the, I had to see how I was addicted to things like guilt. I was addicted to, creating a problem and then feeling really bad about it. And that
Yeah.
bad feeling that I felt, that like self-devaluation after I, caused a fight, I was hooked on it. And I that whole process, I had to watch it. And so, again, it's that intense curious. How curious are you about how your life is happening? Right? How curious are you about, oh, okay, so I didn't do anything. I didn't injure myself. Nothing has changed, but all of a sudden my wrist hurts. Like, I know I didn't hurt myself. I would have remembered hurting myself, but today my wrist is really sore. And it's like, okay, like, get intensely curious instead of saying, oh, I must have just hurt it sometime. I wasn't aware. It's like, no, here's a part of my body. What does this part do? It's a handle, a grip. Like, what did I resolve some type of self-evaluation about having a grip on something, having a handle on something? I remember I had pain in I think it was my elbow, because I had gotten out of my workout routine, and I was like, "Oh, I felt like my arms were like kind of flabby." And I was like judging myself, and I was like, "Oh, I need to do a workout." And then I did a workout and I felt really strong and good. And then my elbow started hurting. And I was like,
Mm.
"Oh, most people would say, 'Oh, I probably hurt it while I was working out.'" But I knew I had devalued my physical performance, right? I was devaluing my body because I was like, "Oh, I'm losing my strength because I haven't done a workout." And then I resolved it, and there the pain comes, right? And so when you get intensely curious, why did I have that argument with my partner? What can I slow down and play back the tape? Because if you can slow things down and play back the tape, nothing will surprise you anymore. You'll
Yeah.
never be like, "I don't know why I'm sick. I don't know why I have this. Poor me. I have." It's like, no, I know exactly why. I mean, that's how conversations go in my world with the people who know this work. They're like, "Oh, I know exactly why I have this lump in my breast. I know exactly why I, had that attack, that gallbladder. It's like, I know exactly why that happened. I know exactly why I have a terrible headache today." And so
Yeah.
it shouldn't be a mystery to you. I know exactly why I had that fight with my partner, because I perceived what they said and I made it mean this, and I twisted it because I was looking at it through the lens of a past experience. And you're like, now I see it. Now I can learn and grow. And so I think intense curiosity, for how things can be different, is part of like that secret sauce of doing the work.
Yeah. I love it. You mentioned some, now that I'm looking at it, a part of me is coming up with this thought. Hey, the some of the foundation, the five biological laws, we haven't really laid that. But let's say for somebody who is like, okay, there's something in here for me. It's starting to speak my language. I'm starting to realize some things and make some connections, and they are willing to understand more of the foundations. How could you explain, these five biological laws in a way that is, let's say, maybe that, I mean, without dimming it down too much, but that can be digestible to the average person listening to this?
Yeah, I would say definitely go on YouTube and look up GNM 101 and watch the 101 video, because there is just so much detail in it. But in a nutshell, the first biological law is there's a cause, there's a
Yeah.
conflict shock, there's a moment in time, caught off guard, acute, dramatic, felt isolated, right? And it doesn't have to be something enormous. It could be a sudden realization of, oh, I'm not as strong as I was, or oh,
Hmm.
it can be just a really, it can be a quick moment, but it does catch you off guard, and then an adaptation starts to happen. And so that adaptation, and so this is the second biological law. So we have the conflict, the thing that catches us off guard, and depending on the type of conflict. So the body is so specific. It knows the exact way you felt in that moment, right?
Yeah.
If it was something I wanted to touch my lips versus something I wanted to fully digest versus something I wanted to eliminate, like where the biological, like the morsel conflict, a morsel conflict is about like something I want to take in and process or something I want to eliminate. The body knows exactly how you feel about that situation. Like if you felt like you had already swallowed it. There's a great case that Dr. Hammer gives of this girl who developed a pancreatic cancer, and it was about this morsel. Often the pancreas is about an inheritance morsel, so it's
Hmm.
something that you expected to get, like it was her uncle or something was going to leave her this trunk, and she already planned that when she's going to get the trunk because he promised it to her, and she already knew where she was going to put it in her house. So it's like in her mind she had already digested it, she already
Hmm.
had she didn't
Yeah.
need to get it in her mouth, she already like knew where it was going to go. But then the trunk went to her sister instead of her. And so this was a huge indigestible morsel conflict for her. She already had digested it in her mind. And so her biology sends the message, we need to be able to digest this, which created proliferation in the pancreas to have more pancreatic juices so I can better digest this thing that was taken away from me. So depending on the theme of the conflict, whether I need, so for the example of the territorial fear, right? I have a
Yeah.
fear in my territory, my bronchial tube needs to widen. I need more air through
Yep.
so I can better defend my territory. So the flavor of the conflict, the specifics of the conflict determine which program turns on. Do we need more cells, right, to produce more juices, or do we need a wider passageway? Or am I a deer in the headlights and I need to play dead, right? And there needs to be no nerve function to these muscles so that I don't get eaten, right? So
Yeah.
that is going to determine the conflict, determines the type of tissue that needs to adapt. When you're in the conflict, unresolved, right? Your hands are cold, you're compulsively thinking, right? This is another way that you can figure out what your conflict is. Where does your mind keep going, right? The compulsive thought, it's not like thoughts are bad and thoughts are causing bad things to happen in your body. That's not how it works. The
Yeah.
compulsive thought is indicating to you the theme of your unresolved conflict. If you just keep thinking about, when is this thing going to happen? When am I going to get married? Oh, you keep thinking about it and it's keep continually on your mind. It's like, okay, that's a conflict for you, right? That's leading you
Mm.
back to maybe a sexual frustration conflict or a self-devaluation conflict. You look at the content of the thought, you pull the thread, and you look, ooh, this is what it's about. The adaptation will persist until you resolve the conflict. So the growth of the tissue, the loss of the tissue, the loss of function of the tissue until there's the resolution.
Yeah.
You breathe a sigh of relief. This is no longer a problem. And then you shift into the restoration. So whatever was built or eroded during the conflict, it now needs to be broken down or needs to rebuild. And that's what's happening. 80% of symptoms happen during the healing phase, during the restoration phase. 20% of symptoms, like constipation, for example, that's a conflict active symptom.
Hmm.
There are, chest pains, angina that happens when the conflict is active. So there are some symptoms that come during conflict activity, but most of the time it's when you're in the restoration. And so when you have a headache, when you're inflamed, when you're swollen, when you're itchy, when you're just like uncomfortable physically in your body, is healing phase. And that will occur. There's the swelling occurs until there's the big squeeze, which is the epicrisis. And that's when the body squeezes the fluid out of the brain, out of the organ, because there's always brain adaptation with every conflict. And so the brain is involved in every single conflict. And then once you squeeze the fluid out, the body goes back into phase B of healing, which is continued scarification. And so that's how the program operates. Like I mentioned, the third biological law is about the theme of each tissue.
Yeah.
The old brain tissues build extra cells. The new brain tissues decompose cells, or lose function. That's how it operates. And then during the healing phase, it reverses. What was built up must be broken down. What was broken down must
Must
be
be
built up.
rebuilt.
right? Pretty simple. And the fourth biological law is the law of the microbes and how the microbes function. So, how is this tissue built up and broken down? With the assistance of microsurgeons. So, this is that big paradigm shifter for people who are still stuck in the idea
Fear
that
of
germs
germs.
cause problems. Yes, germs, bacteria are found at sites of inflammation. But the problem, the misunderstanding that occurred is that we said, oh, this area is inflamed or it's oozing something. Here, let's swab it and let's look under the microscope and we see something there and we say, aha, this thing at the microscope caused the ooey, gooey inflammation spot on the body. And we say, this thing causes that, but we were missing the full context, right? This is like blaming the fire truck for the fire. It's there, but it's part of the repair crew. We didn't look at what happened first, which was the adaptation. So microbes always are serving a purpose. They're doing a job, and they do their job better than a physical surgeon. Think about it. If for a surgeon to get into your lungs, it needs to go through, and yes, I did this in the lab, right? You have to go through layers of skin and bone and fascia and all of this connective tissue to get into the lung to take something out. The microbes, they're just there and they can go ahead and decompose that tumor from the inside. They're your microsurgeons. So, whenever there is an inflammatory process in the body, there's some type of microbial activity that's supporting the restoration of that tissue. There's a wonderful mother who came to one of our retreats earlier this year, and she is really, speaking this language with her daughter. And when she has, when she's got a sore throat, when she's got a tummy ache, their language that they use is like, oh, my little workers, they're doing their job. The little
Mm,
workers in my body, they're doing their job to break down that tissue or to build up that tissue. And that's such a beautiful, I use that imagery with myself. I think of when there's an area in my body that's uncomfortable, it's a construction site and there's little workers there doing jobs, and the uncomfortable feelings will go away when they're done doing their job, right? And my body, that's the one that knows how long the job is going to take, and
yeah.
I can trust that, right? And I know that it's going to just take as long as it takes. And so the different microbes operate in different tissue layers. So the ancient bacteria is tubercular bacteria, operates in the old brain. Bacteria operate in the mesodermal layer, and then in the ectoderm, that's the so-called what they call viruses, which are simply protein particles that are part of this adaptation process that they zoom in on, and they call it a virus. And we all know this is seems like old news at this point for many people in our crowd of like, okay, you guys know, right, that there aren't things called viruses that cause disease. But for those that are new, the idea that there is a particle outside of you that can be sprinkled on you and make you sick is a fairy tale. It is
Yeah.
a myth. They have tried to reproduce this. They cannot reproduce this because it's an endogenous process. You have a conflict. If it's in the ectodermal outer skin germ layer, when it goes through its repair, there's erosion during the conflict. And then when that tissue is rebuilt, there are protein particles that are part of that process that get mislabeled. Again, this is just a problem of mislabeling and missing context. Dr. Hammer gave us this context for understanding why does the bacteria operate there? Why is it doing this? Well, because there was a conflict. There was tissue changes, tissue adaptations, and now the bacteria are serving a purpose. And then we get to the fifth biological law, which is the quintessence, which is just the ribbon on top of there is no evil in nature. There is no malignancy in nature. There is no metastasis of badness in nature. Nature does what makes sense. Nature is biological. Nature is sensible. Nature is programmed to enhance life, preserve life, and reproduce, survive and reproduce. And so when there's something going on, if we can always just come to, my body is doing this for a reason. My body is doing this. My body is adapting intelligently to something in my life that I may or may not be aware of. And so my job is to align myself to the laws of nature and to look at, okay, if I'm looking at this through the lens of my body is doing this for a reason, what area of your body is having a symptom? Is it your eye? Is it your nose? Is it your ear? What do those organs do? They see, they smell, they hear. Okay, what conflict did you have about something you heard, something you saw, something you smelled, right? Like, what does the organ do? And when you
Mm,
get very simple, what does this organ do? How does this organ, because everything here is purposeful. There's not one part that's here that isn't doing something, right? And so when you know what the biological purpose for that organ is and the role that it plays in survival, right? Because each different germ layer, this is, back to that third biological law, each germ layer serves a function. We need to, the oldest germ layer, you need to take in food, right? We need to process food. We need to process morsels. And that's for survival and reproduction. Those are like the oldest, most basic functions. Then we have the deep skin to protect us against attack. We have the connective tissues to give us form and structure. And then we have the outer skin and the territorial and sexual zones that allow us to know our hierarchy, right? So that's about territory, that's about the order and hierarchy. And so everything makes sense. And it's so beautiful. And it really is, it's so very detailed. This body of work, you can't just dabble. Like once, if this makes sense to you, it's like, it's worth understanding the details of it because you can understand hormones, you can understand sexuality, you can understand psychosis, you can understand mental illness when you understand how it all makes sense. So the things we call mental illness, schizophrenia, it makes sense. It makes perfect biological sense if you understand the purpose and the meaning behind it.
Whew. Um, there is so much to take in from what you just said, and I don't even know where to begin in like, you know, digesting, absorbing, and also mirroring some of the nuggets you just offered. One thing that is present is there is a profoundly wise intelligence system that is working in your favor, even when it doesn't look like it. And
No.
especially when it doesn't look like it, this is a time for you to come and attempt to decode, not from a place of fighting your body, but really beginning to understand its language. But the whole system is working in your favor. And the moment you start to see that, no, this has not been this, it's like, it's not a red button, like nuclear internal button that you press and then everything destructs, even though, even then, maybe it would be the only pathway that the body could have seen at that moment. Anyways, what I'm going with this is what I'm receiving beyond everything else is the whole inner system is benevolent. And when we feel like the body is working against us, it's because we are not able to understand yet the benevolence. And when we're able to see that benevolence, we're able to restore the order as well and restore health. And I know there are many things that and this is precisely to the listener. I know there are many things that we said here that probably cause you to swear, or especially if you're coming from a different paradigm of health, and to be like, this is BS. And but I'm just inviting the massive curiosity. I think these times are demanding massive curiosity. I mean, if the events of the last years since 2020 have not brought to your attention that, okay, I need to observe things more, to pay attention to things a little bit more accurately, and to be open to a different perspective, yeah, I don't know what will. So I'm just asking for a certain degree of openness. And I know it's hard when whatever you're exposing yourself to is confronting everything you've known for a long time. I know how challenging that is. So that's what I'm asking to any listener. Um, Before you disregard and dismiss, explore. And there's something about the cellular remembrance of truth that you mentioned at the beginning. It's like when people are seeing truth, and that truth might even be confronting, but something in your body kind of relaxes because it's like, oh, finally you are able to see me. Finally, you are able to see what I've been attempting to say for the longest time. So that's just what I'm inviting to anybody who is listening to this right now. Um, so let's say somebody hears this again and start to say, okay, I hear you, Melissa. This is starting to get into my system. Maybe what are the most widespread types of conflict? I know this. I am aware that I'm attempting to kind of be a little reductionist because some people might lean in there, feel overwhelmed by the vastness of how the body is specific, all the inner mechanisms. What are some kinds of conflict that people can begin maybe to track, maybe one, two, or three? I've heard you talk about self-evaluation conflict with skin separation conflict, and I've also heard through my kind of research that they can even be double separation conflicts, um, where one gets resolved and another one is not yet resolved, and sometimes that can cause some symptoms. Anyways, what I'm what I'm basically getting at, do you see some widespread types of conflict that people can begin to slowly observe and maybe to resolve without too much effort? Like they can begin the cleanup process. And yeah, is there anything that you see?
Oh yeah, I see so many things. Like you said, the separation conflict's a big one. Rashes, itchy. Even if someone's like, "Oh, I react really bad to mosquito bites," right? It's like, okay, well, if you have a strong separation conflict when you have, when you get a bite, right? Because not everyone reacts the same way. Why? For some people, oh, I'm allergic. It's like, oh, well, if you're allergic, that means there's conflict wrapped up. When you get a mosquito bite, your brain remembers, ooh, I need to separate. This is really bad, right? And so that's a big one. Separation conflicts of all types, rashes, psoriasis, that's that double separation conflict.
Yeah.
Look back, always make your timeline. Make your timeline. When did it start? What was going on? What was happening in your relationships? What was happening financially? What was happening with your work? You know, aches and pains, body pain, that's self devaluation, right? Is it what area of the body? What does that area of the body do, right? If it's physical performance, are you a dancer or an athlete? Or, do you, have to run really fast for performance? Right? Like what area of your body? Also, your handedness. This one's very helpful. When you clap, which hand is on top? The hand that's on top, that is your dominant side. So sometimes lefties have been retrained righties. So just pay attention to the clapping test. Some people can have, some split results when it comes to the clapping test, but you can mostly figure out when you have a symptom that shows up on your non-dominant side, that's
Mm,
your mother-child side. So the conflict, if you're like, oh, all of a sudden I have a rash on my left inner elbow, it's like, okay, is it about your mother or do you have children? If you don't have children, it's like, okay, well, look at your mother. Are you missing hugging her? Right? Because it's like, what touches this area of my body? The inner parts of the body are about bringing close, the outer parts are about pushing someone away. Right? So we can decode even that, like the side of the body, the dominant side is the partner side, and partner is basically anybody except your mother or your child. If a
mm,
pet, you can either view it as a partner or as a child, and that depends on your unique perception. Indigestible morsel conflict. So this is upset stomach. If you're having constipation, that's something in your life that feels stuck. It's a morsel that's not moving forward, right? When do you get constipated? When is this happening? What's going on? What feels stuck? What isn't moving forward? What's a morsel? A morsel is something that you want or need or desire. Money can be a morsel. Food obviously is like the most basic morsel is a
yeah.
morsel of food, but money represents, the thing that I want. What feels stuck and not moving forward. Or if you have chronic diarrhea, that means that you're chronically coming off that track. You step on it for a little bit and then you're off of it. And so the diarrhea is during the healing phase. And so when a person has a condition where they're chronically running to the bathroom, they keep stepping on an indigestible morsel conflict track and then they come off it and then the body comes into healing. But if you do that every day, and then you have to see, okay, when did this start? What's been the same ever since that happened? When does this not happen? Pay attention to when your symptom doesn't happen. Oh, when
Mm,
I go on vacation, the symptom doesn't happen. When I'm away from work for, 2 weeks. It's like, oh, and then I get back to work. Oh, is your boss your track? Is your workplace itself? Is that the track? And so it is, you have to become this curious detective of your life experience. When stuff starts, when it stops, pay attention. When do your hands get cold? When do you start compulsively thinking? That is such a power. If you can just start paying attention to that. Oh, yeah. You know what? My hands are a little cold. Yeah. You know what? I can't stop thinking about my neighbor and how they keep putting their trash can on my driveway, right? It's like, okay,
yeah.
you just make these connections. Stink conflicts. That's another really great one, right? When something that you couldn't sniff out, you're like, oh, I couldn't have suspected that was going to happen. And then, achoo, when you sneeze, there was some unexpected, like something that you couldn't sniff out, right? There is, or a stink, something that stunk to you. And then when you resolve it, there's a sneeze. And so this one's really fun to pay attention in your family, where it's like, oh, I couldn't, if your husband can't find his keys, he can't find his keys, can't find, he thought he said, he's like shouting around the house, where are my keys? Who moved my keys, right?
Yeah.
Their keys are found, what happens? Achoo, big sneeze, right? That's going to help you to see, ooh, this was the unexpected thing. And when you start making these connections and you see there's always a connection, right? And notice if you're prone to blaming an outside force. If you're prone to blaming the food, oh, someone must have, sprayed their lawn with pesticide. It's like, okay, well, look also. So for the people who, because a lot of people are really convinced that it's some type of external substance that gets in their body that causes their symptom. That's fine. If you want to hold on to that, keep holding that. But also, if there were a conflict, just look for it. Just like if there was a conflict, like just what does that system in your body? What does that organ do? And if there were a conflict, what would it be? See if you can make a connection, because that's the thing is like the if you're fixated on it being a substance, you'll overlook those subtle shifts in the psyche, those little conflicts. And so I really invite the people who are in that paradigm just to start paying attention. If it was a conflict, what would it be? Right? Instead of just saying, "Oh, my body is, there's some kind of toxin that my body is shedding." I find that if you get too fixated on that, you miss those opportunities to see what's going on behind the scenes, because you already assume that it's a substance. You assume that it's an outside thing or something that's foreign that shouldn't be there, and your body's just removing it, which can be an empowering paradigm. People,
Hmm.
I was in that. That was kind of my first stop along this alternative health. It was like, oh, it's about these toxins. But then I got so kind of fixated on toxins, I got really crazy about it. I got really like neurotic about toxins,
Yeah.
toxins everywhere. I started getting my friends and family freaked out about toxins. And so I found that became too much of an obsession of like trying to purify everything. And so seeing these things as bad, and this, I prefer the model of adaptability. How is my body
Yeah.
adapting to this? And how, and if this is in my system, why was I drawn to this place today where I was going to get exposed to this? So I think there's always a deeper message there. But those are just some of the very common, toothaches. Who do I want to bite? It can be it can be very straightforward. Like really try to think biologically about this. Think biologically. Why would my body do this? Why does this make sense? What does this organ do? Questions like that.
Yeah. I love this so much. And, there are many places where I am at the moment because I have a whole slew of other different questions lined up. And I want to be very respectful of your generosity with your teachings, your time, and your energy. But I feel like there's an integrated model of health that you are kind of like, I feel like your life is a, legacy for, just like the founders of German New Medicine. I feel like that's the way I'm reading your energy at the moment, which is your life being a legacy for some sort of integrated model of health, which is okay. I'm aware of the external factors. They do have some impact, like the toxins and everything, but I cannot obsess over all of that and be in my power. Therefore, I'm going to return to the source of power. I'm still going to address what is external, to a reasonable extent, but I am not going to obsess over it to the point where it drains me of my aliveness. It drains me of even enjoying life because I'm now so interested in sterilizing everything to the point where life itself becomes sterile. Like I'm so obsessed on like I don't know, making sure everything is toxin free. And sure, it has its place. It has its importance. And at the same time, I want to return to the source of power, and it's from this place that I'm gonna relate to this quote unquote toxic world. If you want to put it that way. Um, so where I'm getting at with this is basically how has all of this informed your ability to feel free in the world at this moment?
Absolutely. That freedom piece is everything when it comes to, oh, worrying about every little, bad oil, every little thing that could be. Before, that was my, that was my teaching platform. Is I was like, you have to be so aware of everything you put in your mouth and everything you buy. And it was very much this hyper vigilance of like, there are people putting bad stuff in food and it's poisoning you and making you sick. And it's like, like you said, to a reasonable degree, I eat very well. It doesn't, that hasn't changed. I haven't gone back to, but the chill factor for me, it's like,
Yeah.
chill the F out. Like, you have to chill out. Like, if you're too uptight about it, if you're too worried about it, if you're too paranoid, I notice, when there is, either something that was, used like in the air around me, or and I notice, I see the thought. Right. I used to get so, when I first learned about like dryer sheets and like neurotoxins and fragrances, I could not even walk by the aisle at the grocery store of the detergents without sneezing and saying, "Oh, I'm allergic," and getting a terrible headache because
Yeah.
it was a track. It was such, I couldn't walk in the neighborhood and someone's using the dryer and I could just smell their dryer sheet like talk, and it was, I was fixated on it. Oh, this is the reason for my headache. This is the reason for this because it, you know, and now, again, it's not that I go out of my way to like put myself in those environments, but I'm like, whatever, my body's got it. I'm adaptable, right?
Yeah.
My body knows exactly what to do with this. I'm not going to build this big story about what this ingredient, what this food. It's a chill. It's like I trust my body, I trust myself, I do what makes sense, right? Go to places that make sense. And then if I'm there and I find, oh, they're like spraying a lot of like, air fresheners in here. And it's like, oh, isn't that interesting that I find myself in this place? I learn from it. I let it be a mirror to me. And so that it means everything's a teacher. And so when
Hmm.
everything's a teacher and you're always like down to learn, it's like, okay, I want to learn. Like, why was I drawn here? Why is this in my life? Why, and so it's very relaxed, it's very chill, it's very fun, and that's the thing is when there's not this signal of, uh-oh, there might be something bad going, and there might be something invisible and bad going on. That's the
Yeah.
thing is I'm very wary of the scary invisible, whether it's in the form of toxins or in the form of germs. Anything that someone's like, there's something scary and invisible and it's affecting you, and there's like nothing you can do about it, or you need to take this detox or take this medication. You need to do this thing to get rid of this scary. I don't believe in scary invisibles, right?
Yeah.
I trust the innate intelligence within me to guide me through life, to avoid things that need to be avoided, eliminate things that need to be eliminated, and my body knows exactly what to do. And so it's very much about freedom, chill, joy, playfulness, and yeah, and just noticing when you get neurotic about things. Notice when you get fixated and you're creating something and making it bigger than is useful.
Yeah. I mean, what I'm hearing you say there is that to a certain degree, being so obsessed about clearing every toxin possible in the environment can feed into a shadow form of fragility, which is, oh, I can't. It's basically the message that we're telling to the body is like, oh, I won't survive if I'm exposed to this specific toxin and this toxin, this toxin. And it's feeding into another program of fragility, whereas like I don't know, I often relate to it as the Puritan health advocate, which is, oh, I can't have anything unholy touch me now, and everything around me needs to be holy. The water I drink, no EMFs around me, and everything just needs to be holy for me to maintain my, I don't know. And in that, I see that, geez, man, just take a deep breath. Your body is not that fragile, and yes, take care of it. And at the same time, just for God's sake, let's just take a deep breath. Anyways, I relate a lot to what you're saying at the moment, and I can also understand the other side of the argument. One last question that I would love to ask you, and um, I've been over the last 2 years, I've worked on a book that will be released later this year. It's called Scars of Gold, and the whole principle behind it is, many of the things that we perceive as wounds, whether emotional, physical, and all of that, they carry within them, I don't know, um, kind of wisdom that is sometimes the foundation for the impact that we have on the world. And I wonder if your current body of work is the outcome of a, I don't know, wound that turned into a scar of gold. Was there some sort of defining moment that caused you, that came with a great deal of disillusionment and eye-opening moment, initially it was some sort of pain, emotional injury, wound that caused you to say, no, there's something else, and it put you on this path? Do you have some of that?
So I think so one of the things is and this comes from the work of recall healing, talking about your project purpose, like the thing that you're like in the world to do, and looking at like family dynamics and people in your family. One of my grandmothers, she had cancer, and no, on her death certificate, though, she didn't die of cancer, she died of radiation poisoning.
Mm,
So the treatment. And so, one of the things about like your life path and like your career and like what you choose to do, is informed by, these people in your life and in your family. And that, okay, how could I be the solution to, one of my relatives dying of radiation poisoning? It's like, oh, that I would be championing and sharing the truth about a different model for understanding why cancer even happens. So that certainly at a subconscious level, because that wasn't something that I, knowingly kind of went into this path to right that wrong, but I see, oh, there is that happening. And then also, um yeah, I would say that that example that I gave about, my willingness to like look at my patterns, because if I hadn't, I would not be here. I do not think that I would have. I don't think that the biological laws would have come to find me as a mouthpiece for speaking that truth, because there were so many layers of things that I wasn't able to see or wasn't able to take responsibility for. So I think that being confronted by Steve at that time and him being like, hey, I think you're great, but I do think that, you've got this, you're in these patterns and I'm not interested in living a life of those patterns. And so it was like, ooh, that was the scar that turned into the gold of, hey, there's more available to me, that I wasn't simply. I really thought that I told I remember telling him early in our relationship, I was like, I'm just crazy. And so take it or leave it. Like that. And
yeah,
I was convinced of that, that this is the way that I am. I have these problems and issues. And I'm like basically telling him this isn't going to go away. So if you're into this, you're into all this, this craziness. And he just knew that I was capable of living beyond those patterns. And so, God bless him and all of his patience, because it, is layers, but that certainly is a scar that has turned to gold for sure.
I love it. I was just gonna say that. I was like, well, Steve, if you ever listen to this conversation, God bless you and thank you for, just being willing to be an open-hearted mirror. I have such deep fascination for this work and for everything that you're bringing forth, because I have a hard time believing that God, source, the universe, the body makes mistakes, and the core tenet of everything that I'm doing and all the work I'm doing is like everything that is going within you is it's unfolding in your favor, even when it doesn't make sense, especially when it doesn't make sense. So I love this conversation so much. Again, I'm going to say that I love this conversation so much. So if anybody, you listen to this, it challenged you, please explore that. And sometimes we need to be disillusioned in order to expand and grow and transform. So that's the humble ask and the humble request. So, Dr. Melissa, I wanted to ask you, let's say somebody is getting into your world and they're like, I want to hear more about what you do. I'm interested in I think it's a school of awareness school that you have. I'm interested in that. I want to become more of my own health practitioner. How can I enter your universe? What would you say?
Yeah, so on my blog, so if you go to drmelissasell.com and go to blog, there is a getting started tab where it's just like, okay, here are the resources. Here are, the different, because I really recommend people do like a self, like take it upon yourself to learn, right? To be interested and curious and avail yourself of all the resources. So there's a whole big resource list. And you start at where the spark is for you, right? Is it in awareness and fixing your relationships? Is it in understanding your current health condition? And so that list will help guide you to the resources that you need. Like I said, the GNM 101 video on YouTube, just to kind of like, all right, if you're a brand newbie to hearing about the biological laws, it's good just to kind of like get that full big picture and then just start observing, right? Like that's the paying attention, noticing, making the connections, thinking biologically, why does this make sense? Why, how did my body make sense out of doing this? Right.
Yeah.
And when you see the story, keep following it, right? And really, I just encourage people, like, if you've kind of dabbled, you're kind of aware, GNM, you're like, oh, it's kind of out in my field, like, it's so important to understand this prior to something happening. Just this week, I got a message from someone who, has adult children, and one of the adult children had a health event, like a health event that, obviously they're in the hospital and all of this. And it's like, they're like, oh, my child had this thing. And the child, if they don't know this model, right? Like that's the thing is as soon as like the diagnosis happens, what is your belief system when the symptom hits? When the diagnosis happens, because that in many cases is going to determine the trajectory, because so many people unfortunately find this work once they've already had the diagnosis, once they've already had the health event, which means that their subconscious already assigned a lot of meanings to the diagnosis, to the symptom, and so then it's like this, to disentangle
Deprogramming.
from all that programming and all of that, because really it's fear. Ultimately, what kills people is the fear and that predictive programming about what this means. And the sooner, and I haven't found any model that is as liberating and will set you free and allow you to have peace in the face of a seizure, peace in the face of a lump, peace in the face of blood in the toilet. Like, there is nothing else. If you don't have like something that you're like, my body does what makes sense. The fifth biological law is anchored in my soul, and I know my body only does what makes sense. And so, because if something happens on your body and you get afraid of it, whew, like then we get tangled, right? And then it becomes this like self-fulfilling, scary prophecy of, oh, something's wrong with me. We need to learn. And even with myself, and I've had some symptoms where I'm just like, I see the programming and the grip of like what I was raised with, versus like what I know to be true. And truly, I have to like walk myself through the understanding, the context. How does this symptom get here? What does this mean? Like, even me, I have to do that because it's so powerful. And that's the thing, is you just want to stay out of the clutches of fear of a diagnosis or someone telling you something scary. Nothing scary is going on in your body. That's like the big picture. And so
Yeah.
if this has been in your field for a while, I really encourage you to learn it so it can truly liberate you from the fear of disease and symptoms.
I don't know how somebody can listen to this and not feel a certain degree of interest at the very least. And I know for so many it can be mind bending. There might be a lot of cognitive dissonance, like so many things that want to be reconciled inside of your mind, inside of your brain, just like what. So that was my experience when I first came across German New Medicine. And when I saw you and saw your work, I was just like, man, I'll just love to have an open-hearted conversation about it. So I'm deeply grateful for the fact that you brought it, and the fact that you're not holding back on anything. I deeply appreciate that. Is there one last word of wisdom that you think, okay, we didn't necessarily touch on this specific point, but it's kind of important to have in the back of your head if you're leaning into this and into this universe?
I think we hit all the high notes. I think that truly, like, just landing with my body doesn't make sense. Right. And even if I don't understand it, like you touched on that, it's like there's a context I'm missing. If something is not clear, because the truth is simple and the truth makes sense and the truth is clear and it brings peace and freedom. And if there's something that is confusing or I'm not clear about, right, there's just more for me to learn. And if that can just be your attitude, there's more for me to learn. There's something here for me, right? There's a nugget, there's something that when I see it, it's going to
Yeah.
allow this to make sense and it's going to set me free. And if you lean on that, you'll just keep looking and you will find it, right? And it will lead to your growth. And that's the beautiful thing. Like, when, conflicts aren't bad, they're not something to be scared of or to avoid. Again, they're invitations to grow. They're invitations to that's how we get here, right? We didn't come for boring, easy lives where nothing happens, right? That's just part of the juice, right? We come for the unexpected, to see what I'm made of, right? Like, just see, okay, let's see what I'm made of. Let's see how adaptable and creative I can be. That's why you came here. You came here to see how adaptive and creative you can be. But if you're stuck in fear, if you're stuck in old paradigms that don't work, it's hard for you to access that adaptability and that creativity. And so, but you have it within you. Every single person, you have it within you. You wouldn't
Yeah.
be here if you didn't have that, right? There's brilliance, there's adaptability, there's creativity, and you just need to tap into it, find it, and allow the stuff that sucks in your life, use it as a stepping stone. It's going to get you there if you approach it in the right way. And so I invite you to do that.
Oh, that's awesome. Um, Alrighty, everyone. Thank you for tuning into this conversation. I'm inviting you to rewatch, honestly, because I find it rich, especially if you're coming to this, if you're just opening the door to this world. I'm inviting you to rewatch it, and if you challenge something in you, I see you. And again, I invite you to be open-minded, open-hearted, but explore before you disregard. That would be my invitation. So thank you so much, Dr. Melissa, for being on the show, for bringing all this, wisdom and knowledge to the conversation. And it's been a pleasure to have you.
But thank you, Xavier. This has been so fun. You're such a deep thinker. I loved your questions. And yeah, the way that the conversation unfolded, I think was really beautiful.
Awesome.